The mail-order bride agency promised Nathaniel Brent a delicate wife to soothe his lonely ranch. He paid for delicate, he paid for soft. What arrived was Constance Weller, a woman twice the size of any he'd ever known, with hands scarred by labor and eyes that held the story of a storm he hadn't yet seen. She was not the woman he had paid for, but as she stood before him unafraid and unbroken, he realized he had received exactly what he truly needed. The wind stirred dust across the depot platform, lifting it in dry little eddies that scratched the ankles and bit the eyes. The noon stagecoach screeched to a halt, wooden wheels jerking against iron brake. Nathaniel Brent stepped forward before the dust had even settled. He wasn't a man accustomed to waiting. Not for cattle, not for rain, and certainly not for a wife he'd paid good money for. He adjusted the brim of his hat eyes, scanning the stage door with a quiet kind of hunger, a hope he hadn't let himself name since Clara died 3 winters back. He had asked for delicate. That was the word he'd circled on the agency form. Delicate. Sweet-tempered, able to cook, to sew, to tend a small home, and maybe if the Lord saw fit, bear a child or two. He hadn't asked for love, just peace company, the kind that wouldn't make the cabin feel so cavernous come nightfall. He'd paid the full fare up front and added a bonus for the speed of delivery. He'd shaved his beard that morning and even splashed a bit of river water on his neck. He didn't expect fireworks, just someone small and quiet who wouldn't spook the livestock. But when the coach door swung open and she stepped out, the air went still. She filled the frame entirely. The top of her head scraped the lintel, and when she stepped down the steps, groaned like old fence rails in winter. The woman wore a faded green dress that looked 2 stitches from surrender. The seams pulled taut around arms that could split logs and shoulders wide enough to carry burdens Nathaniel hadn't imagined. Her hair was pinned back hastily, sweat darkening the fabric near her collar. A single suitcase dangled from her hand, like it weighed nothing. Behind her, the driver dropped down with a grunt and tossed Nathaniel a questioning look. "This here's the last one, mister. She's yours, I reckon." The woman glanced at him, then dark eyes, steady, unreadable, and Nathaniel's mouth went dry. She had the look of someone who had crossed not just miles, but years of hard road to get here. Not delicate, not sweet-tiered. She looked like she could carry a wounded man and a sack of flour across a mountain range without stopping to rest. Still, she walked toward him. Nathaniel Brent. Her voice was deep warm, a quiet thunder wrapped in cotton. He swallowed. "That's me." She nodded once, like that was all she needed to hear. "I'm Constance." He blinked. Constance. Constance. Weller used to be. She looked away toward the horizon. "Don't suppose it matters now?" There was no apology in her voice, no excuse, just a statement of fact delivered plain and unashamed. Nathaniel tried to speak again, but his words got tangled somewhere behind his teeth. This wasn't what he'd ordered. Not even close. But something in the set of her jaw stopped him from sending her back. He cleared his throat. "Well, my wagon is that way. You hungry?" Constance nodded. "Always." They rode in silence, save for the creak of the wagon and the crows overhead. She sat beside him, like she'd sat beside 100 other men before, straight-backed and unmoved. She didn't fidget, didn't chatter, just watched the land roll by her eyes, scanning the trees like she was looking for ambush. Nathaniel kept sneaking glances at her from the corner of his eye. Her hands were large but clean scarred along the knuckles. Her boots he hadn't noticed before weren't the soft leather shoes of a city girl. They were stitched and cracked from wear, meant for walking, long walking. The suitcase sat between her knees. He wondered what was inside, but didn't ask. By the time they reached the ranch, dusk had begun its slow descent. The cattle were grazing low in the valley, and the cabin stood quiet under the cottonwoods. Nathaniel hopped down, hitched the team, and opened the gate. Constance stepped down without help and waited by the porch as he unlocked the door. Inside, the air smelled faintly of smoke and pine tar. He'd cleaned or tried to sweep the floor, wiped the stove, even laid out a patchwork quilt over the bed in the corner. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. "You can take the room," he said, jerking his head toward the curtained corner. She stepped past him, set her suitcase down, and stood still a moment, just breathing. Nathaniel busied himself with the stove. "Not sure what you're used to, but I've got beans and bread. Maybe a bit of salt pork if the cellar didn't go warm." "Sounds fine," Constance replied. "I'll help." She rolled up her sleeves, revealing forearms thick with muscle and freckles, and started chopping onions like it was the most natural thing in the world. They worked in silence again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable, just quiet. Over supper, Nathaniel finally worked up the nerve to ask, "You were supposed to be someone else." Constance chewed, slowly swallowed, and wiped her mouth. "That's true. What happened?" She looked him in the eye. She backed out, changed her mind. They'd already paid the fare, so the agency offered it to me. "Why'd you say yes?" Constance set her fork down because I needed out, and I figured maybe someone needed me too. He didn't ask more. Not yet. Something in her tone warned him against it. They finished the meal in near silence. Nathaniel washed the dishes while she dried, and when they were done, she retreated to the corner and pulled the curtain closed. He sat by the fire staring into the flames, wondering what exactly had arrived on his doorstep. Sleep was hard to come by. Every creak of the cabin made him alert, not out of fear, but awareness. There was someone else breathing in this space now, someone big and quiet and unexpected. Sometime near dawn, a sound woke him. A sob, quick and sharp, then muffled. Nathaniel sat up slowly, listening. Another sob, this one followed by the soft creak of bed springs. He rose barefoot and stepped quietly to the curtain. He didn't pull it back, just stood there. Constance. Silence. Then her voice, rough and trembling. "Go back to sleep. You all right?" She didn't answer for a long time, then, softly. "Do you believe people can start over, Mr. Brandt?" He leaned his forehead against the wood. "I'd like to." On the other side of the curtain, the crying stopped. When morning came, she was already outside splitting wood, like she'd been born with an axe in hand. Her sleeves were rolled again, hair tied back. Nathaniel stepped onto the porch and watched her a moment. The rhythm of her swings, the way she breathed through it like she was chasing something away. "You don't have to do that," he said. She didn't look up. "I know." The days passed like that. Quiet, uneasy, but steady. Constance cooked, cleaned, worked the land like she'd always belonged there. Nathaniel found himself watching her more than he should, trying to reconcile the woman he'd asked for with the one he'd received. One night, she joined him by the fire without being asked. They sat in silence until he finally said, "You ever been married before?" She didn't flinch. "Yes." "What happened?" "He died." He waited, but she didn't offer more. Another night passed, and then came the knock. Late, too late for travelers, too soft for comfort. Nathaniel opened the door, slow hand resting on the rifle by the jamb. Outside stood a girl, barefoot, dirty, maybe 12. "Please," she whispered. "He's going to kill her." Nathaniel's blood ran cold. "Who?" The girl looked past him straight at Constance. "My mama, he's hurting her again." Constance was already standing. Nathaniel stepped forward. "You know this child?" Constance didn't answer. She grabbed her coat and boots. Nathaniel followed her outside. "Where are you going?" She didn't even pause. "Where I should have gone a long time ago." The wind had picked up, and the sky rolled with clouds the color of bruises. Constance's boots hit the packed earth hard as she moved across the yard toward the barn, the little girl stumbling to keep pace beside her. Nathaniel trailed behind, half-dressed, the cold biting through his shirt, but he couldn't go back inside. Not now. Not after what he'd seen in her eyes. That wasn't just concern. That was recognition memory. Maybe even guilt. "Constance!" He called, his breath pluming into the air. She didn't turn around. "I need your horse." Nathaniel blinked. "That's 10 maist at least. Maybe more if it's the way I think you're headed." She reached for the saddle without looking at him. "I'll make it." The little girl, shivering now in her threadbare dress, looked up at Nathaniel. "He's real mad this time. He's got the belt." That phrase landed like a blow to the gut. Nathaniel moved forward and took the saddle down himself, swinging it over the mayor's back. "You're not going alone. I didn't ask you to come," Constance said, tightening the cinch. "I didn't ask for you either, remember?" he replied, voice low but steady. "But here we are." For a beat, neither moved. Then Constance handed him the res. "Fine, but don't slow me down." They left the child wrapped in quilts by the hearth with a plate of bread and jerky. Nathaniel added more wood to the fire and locked the door behind him. The road ahead wasn't one he'd planned on, but he felt something shift inside as he mounted up behind Constance and spurred the mare forward into the rising dark. They rode hard. The mare's hooves pounded the frozen ground, breath steaming into the wind. Nathaniel didn't speak, didn't need to. His arms were around her waist, and he could feel the tension in her body like a live wire. Whatever waited at the end of this ride, she was preparing for war. "Who is he?" he finally asked over the wind. Constance didn't answer. "My brother-in-law," she said, finally. "His name's Ward." Nathaniel frowned. "Brother-in-law. My sister married him 10 years ago. I tried to warn her, but she shook her head. She wouldn't hear it. Said I was jealous. Said I didn't know what love was." Nathaniel let the silence fall again, but his mind was racing. If this girl, the barefoot one, was her niece, then there were more lives at stake than just the sisteress. And something in Constance's posture told him this wasn't the first time she'd ridden toward that cabin with dread in her belly. They reached the treine just before dawn. The house came into view, a sagging structure leaning against the wind, its roof patched with tar and desperation. Smoke drifted from the chimney and faint light glowed behind the tattered curtains. Constance dismounted without a word and handed him the res. "Stay out of sight." Nathaniel bristled. "You expect me to just let you go in alone?" "Yes," she said, already moving. "He won't talk if he sees a stranger." He hesitated, jaw tight, but nodded. "You scream, and I come through that door." Constance didn't smile, but her eyes flicked to his just once before she walked away. She stepped up onto the porch like she belonged there, like she had every right to cross that threshold again. Nathaniel crept around the side, crouching near the broken fence line, every nerve lit with fire. The door opened. He couldn't hear words, but he saw her disappear inside. A few moments passed, then raised voices, a crash, a scream. Nathaniel was already moving. He burst through the door just as Ward backhanded Constance hard enough to stagger her. The man was tall but soft around the middle, the kind of strength that came from bullying, not labor. His face was twisted and rage red and wet with drink. A belt dangled from one hand, its edge stained darker than the rest. The room stank of sweat rot and spilled whiskey. The children, two of them, cowered in the corner, eyes wide with terror. Constance stood tall again, a line of blood trailing from her mouth. "You shouldn't have come back," Ward snarled. "And you shouldn't have put hands on my sister," she shot back, stepping between him and the children. He lunged. Nathaniel didn't wait. He crashed into the man with full force, sending them both sprawling across the floor. The belt flew from Ward's hand, clattering against the stove. They grappled, fists slamming into ribs and jaws. Ward was stronger than he looked, but Nathaniel had the fury of witnessing too much. Constance dragged the children out the back as the fight raged. Ward slammed Nathaniel into the wall, sending dust raining down from the rafters. Nathaniel countered with a knee to the gut, then a fist to the temple. Ward staggered, slipped on the spilled liquor, and crashed into the edge of the table. His body went still. Nathaniel stood, chest heaving, and looked down. Ward groaned, alive, but unmoving. Constance reappeared in the doorway, her sister behind her, clutching the children. The woman looked ghostly, skin-pale eyes sunken, but she was breathing. "We're leaving," Constance said, voice cold as iron. The sister hesitated. "But the house? It's not worth what it costs you," Nathaniel said. They gathered what little they could carry, blankets, a skillet, a sack of dried beans, and left Ward on the floor, moaning curses through a broken jaw. The ride back was slow. They had 2 horses now Nathaniel's and a scrawny mule from the shed, but 7 people made the pace crawl. The children huddled against their mother, who hadn't spoken a word since they'd left. The little girl who had come to Nathaniel's door rode behind him, arms wrapped tight around his waist. By the time the cabin came into view, the sun was low and red against the horizon. Nathaniel helped them inside, laid pallets near the fire, and brought out what food he had left. Constance tended her sister's bruises in silence. Nathaniel didn't ask questions. The air was heavy with things that couldn't be spoken. Not yet. That night, as the children slept and the fire burned low, Nathaniel stepped onto the porch and stared up at the stars. Constance joined him a moment later, arms crossed tight against the cold. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For bringing that here." He shook his head. "You brought them out. That's what matters." She nodded slowly. "I thought I could forget. Thought if I went far enough, made myself someone else, maybe it'd all just stay buried." Nathaniel didn't look at her, but his voice was steady. "Doesn't work like that." "No," she agreed. "It doesn't." They stood together in the quiet, the wind whispering through the trees. Inside the cabin had never been so full, so loud, so alive. "You didn't have to come with me," Constance said. "Finally." "I know." "Then why did you?" He turned to her then. "Because I couldn't let you face that alone." Her eyes searched his, and something in her posture softened. "Most folks don't stick around once they see the real me." Nathaniel stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth of her breath in the cold air. "Then, most folks are fools." She didn't reply, just looked down at her hands. "They hurt people," she whispered. "Not just with fists, with words, with silence, with leaving when it gets hard." "I know," he said. "I've been left." Constance looked up again. "Not by choice." Nathaniel hesitated. Then quietly, she died. Took the child with her. Fever came fast. I was gone on a cattle run. Came back to find them buried and the stew pot still on the stove. Constance's jaw clenched. "I'm sorry." He nodded. "Me too." They stood that way a long time, until the cold chased them back inside. That night, he didn't sleep near the fire. He took the floor near the door rifle across his lap, just in case Ward found the courage to follow. But no one came, and when dawn broke, the cabin was still. Constance moved like a ghost in the kitchen, preparing a thin porridge for the children. Her sister watched from the corner, still silent. Nathaniel stepped out to tend the animals, but paused at the fence line. There on the horizon was dust, not storm dust. Horsemen, 3 of them, riding hard. He turned and ran for the cabin. "Constance," he called, throwing open the door. "We've got company." She didn't ask who. She grabbed the rifle from the wall and checked the chamber. "Get the children into the root cellar," Nathaniel barked. "Now!" Constance shoved open the trapdoor by the stove and ushered the sister and children below. Nathaniel took the front rifle ready, heart pounding like a war drum. The riders crested the ridge just as the trapdoor closed. And then just as Nathaniel drew a bead on the first one, the lead rider raised his hand. A white flag. Nathaniel blinked. Brant the man called, "We ain't here for trouble." But Nathaniel didn't lower the gun. Neither did Constance, because the second rider was Ward, bloodied, beaten, and smiling. Ward's smile was crooked now, split by a purpling welt along his jaw, and his right eye had swollen nearly shut. Still, he sat tall in the saddle, like a man with a winning hand, flanked by 2 riders who bore the same slicked confidence. Neither bore badges, but both had guns easy at the hip, and Nathaniel didn't need a lawman's instinct to know this wasn't a peace visit. Dust settled behind them, the cold wind flattening their coats against lean frames. One of them spat to the side, never breaking eye contact with the cabin. Constance stood a pace behind Nathaniel's rifle, leveled steady against her shoulder. "Don't trust the flag," she said quietly. "Ward couldn't spell truce if you carved it into his coffin." Nathaniel's eyes didn't waver from the riders. "Then let's not blink first." Ward raised both hands in a show of civility. "Don't be foolish now, Brant. This ain't your fight." Nathaniel stepped off the porch rifle still raised. Wasn't my fight 2 nights ago either, but that didn't stop you from beating your wife and terrorizing children. You broke my jaw." Ward replied, his smile twisting tighter. "And you took what's mine." Constance laughed once short and without humor. "They were never yours, Ward. Not a soul in that house ever belonged to you." Ward ignored her eyes, still on Nathaniel. "I'm not here for blood, just a fair deal. I get my family back. You keep your cabin." Everybody walks away. Nathaniel spat in the dirt. "You came riding up on my land with hired guns and a smile full of lies. You don't leave here with nothing but regrets. You're already getting more than you deserve." One of the other men, tall, lean, hawk-nosed, clicked his tongue. "That's so Constant," stepped forward, then rifle, never wavering. 3 seconds to ride off, boys. After that I start putting holes in your fancy coats." The riders shifted, uncertain now. This wasn't the reception they'd expected. The man on the left adjusted his grip on the res. "She's serious, Ward." But Ward didn't flinch. He leaned slightly in his saddle and called, "Ellen, come on out, sweetheart. I know you're in there. The kids too. Don't let these strangers speak for you." The cabin door stayed closed, the root cellar below it even quieter. Ward's voice grew louder. "You come out now, and I swear, before God, I won't lay a hand on you again. You have my word, Evie?" Nathaniel felt Constance stiffen beside him. That name, she muttered. He only used it when he meant to hurt her. The second stretched long. Then came the sound, soft at first, a quiet creak from within. Constance turned sharply, the trapor a child's whimper. Before she could move, the front door swung open, and Evelyn stepped into view. She stood small in the doorway, wrapped in one of Nathaniel's old coat's eyes, shadowed with exhaustion. Behind her, the children hovered in half-hiding, clinging to each other. She looked at Ward with the weight of 1,000 yesterdays pressing down on her spine. "Go home, Ward," she said, voice dry and thin. Ward tilted his head. "That ain't how you talk to your husband. You're not my husband. You're a mistake I survived." The rider to Ward's left hissed in a breath through his teeth. The mood shifted. Ward's jaw twitched. "You can't just walk out. That's not how this works." Elin stepped forward, then "Shoot me." The air went still. Constance stepped forward. "Get back inside." But Evelyn didn't. She stood on the edge of the porch like someone who'd spent too long in shadow and wasn't afraid of dying in the sun. "You want me that bad, Ward?" she asked. "Come take me, but know this, I'll fight back now." Ward hesitated, clearly calculating. "This is your last chance," he said. Then Constance fired. The bullet struck the dirt inches from Ward's horse, sending the animal rearing. The other horses danced nervously, spooked by the sudden crack. The rider to Ward's left cursed and reached for his gun. Nathaniel fired next. The man's hat flew from his head as he ducked, and the bullet splintered a tree behind him. Horses screamed. Gunfire erupted in sharp succession. Constance moved fast, shoving Evelyn back inside and slamming the door. Nathaniel dropped behind the water trough, reloading as the second rider returned fire. Smoke clouded the air. The crack of gunpowder echoed across the hills. One rider took off heels, digging into his horse's flanks. Ward's mount spun in confusion, and the man struggled to stay seated. Nathaniel took aim, but before he could fire, Ward wheeled the horse and bolted down the trail. The last rider hesitated, then followed. Silence returned. Nathaniel stood slowly, smoke curling from the rifle barrel. He scanned the tree-iron, breath-heavy heart, hammering like hooves on stone. Constance stepped out, eyes sweeping the horizon. "They'll come back," she said. Nathaniel nodded. "Then we'll be ready." Inside, Evelyn clutched her children, shaking. Constance knelt beside her. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let you open that door." Evelyn didn't answer, just stared at the wall. That night, no one slept. Nathaniel took first watch rifle across his knees. Constance patrolled the windows, eyes sharp in the moonlight. Evelyn sat curled in the corner, arms around her children, murmuring soft prayers, and for the first time, Nathaniel heard Constance whisper too. "Lord, if you're watching, let them be strong." The next morning, Constance brought a map to the table. "We can't stay here," she said. He'll be back next time with more men. Nathaniel frowned. So we run. We move, she corrected. Not run. There's a church mission 2 days east tucked behind the ridge. They help women like Evie. They've got guards, fences, walls. Nathaniel studied her face. You've been there. She nodded. A long time ago when I needed to disappear. Evelyn looked up. You think they'd take us? I know they will. Nathaniel turned to the window, watching the wind bend the trees. Then we move at dusk. They packed what little they had. Blankets, food, water. Constance taught the oldest child how to hold a knife. Showed Nathaniel where the mission sat on the map. It'll be rough terrain, she warned. Narrow twisting, but it'll get us there hidden. By evening, the cabin sat hollow again. Every soul packed into the wagons and saddles the trails behind them, already fading in wind and dust. They moved through the night. Children slept, wrapped in quilts, heads bobbing with the rhythm of the trail. Evelyn rode between Constance and Nathaniel, her silence still heavy, but her eyes more alert. Nathaniel kept a hand near his rifle, always ears straining for hoof-beat-ats behind them. On the second night, as stars pressed low and silence reigned, they heard the sound. A twig snapped. Constance froze hand up. The wagons halted. Nathaniel slid off his horse rifle raised. There, Constance whispered, pointing toward the ridge. A figure just one. He stepped out slowly, hands up. It was Ward. It was the rider from before, the one whose hat Nathaniel had shot clean off. His coat was torn, his lip bleeding. I'm not here to fight, he called softly. I came to warn you. Constance didn't lower her rifle. Start talking. Ward, he's gathered men. 4, maybe 5, some rough ones. Said you embarrassed him. Said he'd burn the land flat to find you. Nathaniel stepped forward. Why are you telling us the man looked down? Because I've seen what he does when nobody stops him, and I figure I owe someone for not bleeding out back there. Constance still didn't trust him. How far behind? Maybe a day, maybe less. Then get out of our sight, she said. He nodded once and disappeared back into the trees. They pushed harder after that. No more stops, no more rest. The mission came into view as the sun bled over the mountains, stone walls, a bell tower, and 2 armed men posted at the gate. Nathaniel pulled the wagon up to the gate and dismounted. One of the guards stepped forward. Help you. We've got women and children, he said. In danger, man coming after them. She said this place might shelter us. The guard looked at Constance, then at Evelyn. Then he nodded. Bring them in. Inside, the mission was quite safe. Nathaniel helped unload the wagon, while Constance led Evelyn to one of the sisters, a kind-faced woman who took the children into her arms like they were her own. Nathaniel stood outside, staring at the ridge, watching, waiting. Constance joined him. You should rest. So should you. She leaned against the wall beside him. I haven't slept more than an hour in 2 nights. Nathaniel glanced at her. You think they'll be safe here? She looked through the gates toward the sleeping children. I think they're safer now than they've ever been. He nodded, and us. Constance's eyes met his. I don't know. He wanted to say more, wanted to ask what came next, but then the bell rang. 1 toll, then 2. The guards yelled. Footsteps rushed. From the ridge came riders 5. At their head Ward, and this time he wasn't smiling. The bell clanged again, louder now, echoing through the stone courtyard like a warning shot from heaven itself. Dust rolled in waves down the ridge as Ward and his hired men descended. 5 dark shapes on horseback, cutting fast across the golden morning light. Inside the walls, the mission stirred to life. Cloistered sisters ushered children indoors with hushed urgency. Guards scrambled to the gate muskets and rifles shaking in their hands, not from fear, but anticipation. Because Ward Crowley had come not just for revenge, but for spectacle, and the mission of St. Myra had survived worse than him. Nathaniel moved without thinking. He slammed the heavy gates closed himself, thick timbers groaning as the iron latch dropped into place. Brace the west wall, he barked at the guards, and keep the women away from the windows. The older of the two men, a wiry fellow with a musket older than sin, gave him a look. Humilitary. "No," Nathaniel replied, grabbing a box of rounds from a nearby crate. "I bury cattle for a living, but I know when death's coming." Constance was already halfway up the bell tower, rifles slung across her shoulder and a second weapon in her hand. She scanned the slope through the cracked spyglass nailed to the ledge, her jaw tight. "They're not charging," she called. "They're lining up like it's a parade," Nathaniel muttered. Ward came into focus. He wasn't masked, wasn't armoured. He wore that same black coat, though this time it had been brushed clean, the collar pinned straight, like he meant to make an impression. He raised one hand, and his horse stopped obediently at the base of the slope. Then slowly, deliberately, Ward dismounted. He stood on the hard earth like he owned it. "Parley," he shouted. The guard beside Nathaniel scoffed. "Ain't that rich?" Nathaniel stepped forward. "I'm listening." Ward cuped his hands. "I got no quarrel with your church. I got no bone to pick with God. All I want is what was stolen from me." Constance barked a bitter laugh from the tower. "Funny. That's what Evelyn said every day of her marriage." Ward ignored it. "I want my wife and my sister-in-law and my niece and nephew. They come out. No blood needs to spill. That's a promise. Your promises ain't worth a stale bean," Nathaniel called back. "Maybe not," Ward said, spreading his arms. "But this ground's worth something, ain't it? This mission, these people?" He smiled, then cruel and slow. "You think I came without fire?" Nathaniel stiffened. Ward turned and whistled. From behind the hill, another figure appeared, dragging something heavy. A barrel tar-sealed rope, handled. Constance's stomach turned. "That's oil." More barrels followed. 3, then 5. All rolled down the slope and into the field just outside the mission's gate. Ward called again. "You got till sundown. After that, we light the fuse." He turned, climbed back onto his horse, and rode off a short distance, his men falling into loose formation behind him. They weren't leaving. They were settling in. Constance descended the tower 2 steps at a time. "He's going to burn us out." Nathaniel nodded. "He thinks if he sets enough fire, we'll give them back." Elin stood by the door, her face pale. "He means it. He'll kill everyone here." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. "Not if we kill him first." The mission's priest, a quiet, silver-haired man named Father Marius, stepped forward. Then, "No blood inside these walls," he said calmly. "This place is sanctuary." Nathaniel turned to him. "With respect, Father, he didn't come for prayer." The priest looked out at the barrels, then back to Nathaniel. "Then we buy time." Nathaniel took charge of the defense. They moved the children and nuns into the lower Cloas-packed water barrels around the inner buildings and started digging shallow fire breaks between the gate and the first row of dwellings. Constance patrolled the walls, checking ammo-counting rifles. She had that same wart-tight set to her jaw, the look she wore before breaking Ward's nose and dragging her sister from hell. By dusk, the courtyard shimmered with tension. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows, turning every step into a threat. Ward hadn't moved. He sat just beyond the ridge with his men drinking something dark from a tin flask. The mission's bell rang once, not in warning, in defiance. Nathaniel stood at the gate, hand on the latch. Constance stood beside him, rifle loaded, hammer cocked. "Just in case," she said. Then the first arrow lit up, a streak of flame in the twilight. It sailed over the gate arced high and landed in the dry grass near the outer wall. The fire caught instantly. Screams erupted. Guards ran with buckets, but Ward had timed it perfectly. Every time a flame was doused, another flared up yards away. Burning arrows rained down like judgment. Nathaniel saw movement near the barrels. Ward's men rolling them closer, one of them holding a torch. "Don't let them reach the gate," he roared. The mission's defenders returned fire. Bullets cracked through the night. One of Ward's men dropped tumbling into the fire he'd helped set. The others scattered, but not far. They wanted the barrels close enough to catch the walls. Then Ward himself rode forward again, straight into the line of fire. Nathaniel raised his rifle, but hesitated. Constance didn't. She fired clean and fast, and Ward's horse reared, bucking him off. He hit the dirt hard, and the torch he carried rolled loose landing inches from the closest barrel. Flame licked the side. Nathaniel didn't think. He sprinted through the smoke, vaulted the half-fallen gate, and reached the barrel just as the fire caught the rope handle. He kicked it aside, boots pounding the flame-flat hands, blistering in the heat. Behind him, Ward staggered to his feet. "You're dead, Brant," he spat. Nathaniel turned. "You first." They crashed together like wolves' fists flying. Ward swung wild, fueled by liquor and hate. But Nathaniel fought with purpose. Every blow he landed was for Evelyn, for the children, for the peace Ward had never let anyone keep. They fell to the dirt, rolling through ash. Ward drew a knife. Nathaniel twisted it free and drove his fist into Ward's throat. The man gasped. Constance appeared, rifle swinging down. "Move," she told Nathaniel. He rolled aside. Constance knelt, the rifle butt pressed against Ward's chest, but she didn't shoot. "You lost," she said. Ward choked, blood bubbling in his mouth. "I still own them." "No," she said. "You never did." Then she rose and walked away. The rest of Ward's men scattered. Without their paymaster, their fight dissolved into self-preservation. A few dropped their weapons. One tried to ride, but was shot in the leg by the old mission guard and dragged off to the infirmary. Nathaniel stood over Ward a moment longer, then turned away too. Inside the mission, the fires had been controlled. No buildings lost, no lives taken. The children huddled with the sisters. Evelyn curled tight with her daughter, her eyes wide, but full of something new. Peace, maybe, or the beginning of it. Father Marius said a quiet prayer over the bodies outside, and no one stopped him. Later, as the stars climbed and the gates stood closed again, Nathaniel sat alone by the well, staring into the quiet. Constance found him there. "You saved them," he said. "So did you." "You could have killed him." "I wanted to," she admitted. "So why didn't you?" She sat beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I used to be like him." Nathaniel turned sharply. "What, not cruel?" she said quickly. "But angry, so angry. After I left the first man I married, I thought the only way to survive was to never feel again, to be harder than the world. I hurt people trying to prove I wasn't weak. You're not weak." She looked at him. Really looked. "Neither are you." They sat in silence, breathing the night. Then she said it soft, like a truth she'd been holding too long. "I was scared when I stepped off that stagecoach. Thought maybe you'd hate me, that you'd send me back. I know I wasn't what you wanted." Nathaniel didn't reply for a long time. Then slowly, "I didn't know what I wanted, but I think it was you." Her eyes welled, but she blinked the tears away. "You still want a wife?" she asked. After all this, he reached for her hand. Callous, scarred strong. "I want peace," he said, "and I want to build it with you." Constance leaned her head on his shoulder, and for once, the world outside was quiet. But far down the ridge beyond the firelit fields and ruined barrels, a man watched. Not Ward, someone else. Rider in grey face hidden, watching, waiting, then turning away into the trees. Morning broke soft in gold, creeping slow across the blood-wormed soil outside St. Mia's mission. Smoke no longer blackened the sky, though its scent clung to the stone walls like a warning. The fields beyond the gate bore scars, burnt grass, broken arrows, the charred remains of barrels that never quite reached their mark, and amid it all silence. Not the kind that follows peace, but the kind that follows something unfinished. Nathaniel rose before the others, shoulders aching, jaw stiff from the night spent on stone steps. The world outside had changed shape overnight. It no longer felt like a hiding place. It felt like a crossroads. A line had been crossed by Ward, by Constance, by himself, and once crossed, there was no going back. He walked the perimeter of the mission, slowly, boots crunching over scorched ground. The air smelled faintly of ash and clean dew, the strange marriage of ruin and rebirth. In the east, where the sun peeked over the hills, birds were already singing. He paused by the gate fingers grazing the fresh hammer marks where he'd helped reinforce the timbers. The iron latch held strong, but gates could only hold so much. The real danger he sensed would come from another direction. Footsteps approached. He didn't turn. "I didn't sleep either," Constance said quietly, stopping a few paces behind him. He nodded, once eyes still scanning the hills. He was watching us. Ward. No, Nathaniel frowned. Someone else. After the fight, just before dawn, I saw a Rider grey coat stayed just long enough to see how it ended. Constance's voice sharpened. "You sure?" Nathaniel finally turned to look at her. "I've buried enough men to know the difference between a scavenger and a predator. This one was waiting for something." She folded her arms, the morning breeze catching the edges of her shirt. "You think Ward wasn't working alone?" "Maybe not from the beginning," Nathaniel said. "But I think someone's interested in what he failed to do." Constance exhaled slowly. "We need to move them. Elin, the kids, they won't be safe here forever." "And us?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "We go with them at least until they're settled." Nathaniel leaned against the gate, watching the valley. "You know where they should go." Constance nodded. "There's a settlement near Fox Hollow, built by women who ran from men like Ward. They farm, teach, raise their own. It's not big, but they protect their own." Nathaniel looked at her. "You've been there?" She hesitated. "I helped build it." He blinked. "Before she nodded, before I ever signed a marriage contract, before I thought peace meant shrinking myself." There was something in her face then, regret maybe, or a shadow of something harder. But it passed. By mid-morning, they'd gathered the supplies. The priest offered a mule cart jars of pickled vegetables, sacks of oats, and flour. The guards helped repair the wheels, and a few of the sisters packed salves and cloth for the children. Elin stood silent as her children were lifted into the cart, one arm still in a makeshift sling from the bruising Ward had left behind. She hadn't spoken much since that night, but when Nathaniel touched her shoulder and asked, "You ready?" she nodded without hesitation. The mission bell rang once, not in warning this time, but as a farewell. They rode out in silence. Nathaniel led the mule cart. Constance rode beside it, hand never far from her rifle. Evelyn sat in the back, her children asleep against her sides. Behind them, the valley stretched long and quiet, and on the ridge far enough not to cause alarm, but close enough to be seen, stood that grey-coated rider watching again. By sundown, they reached the river crossing. The water was high from last week's storms, and the bridge, an old span of timber and rusted nails, groaned beneath the cart's weight. But they made it across, and when they climbed the next ridge, Constance pointed to a flicker of chimney smoke in the distance. "Fox Hollow, as that way," she said. Nathaniel studied the trees. "We may camp here. If they've followed, we'll see their fire." They set up camp in a narrow clearing just beneath the ridge. A single fire, sparse rations, no tents, just blankets and the stars above. Nathaniel offered first watch. Constance took second. Evelyn slept with the children curled against her, her hand resting protectively over her daughter's chest. In the middle of the night, as the fire dimmed to coals, Constance stirred Nathaniel gently. "Come with me," she whispered. He followed her up the slope to where the trees thinned and the moon painted the world in silver. She sat on a flat stone rifle across her knees, staring out at the distant valley. "I've been thinking," she said, without turning. He sat beside her. About us." Nathaniel's breath caught. "I was trying to remember," she continued, "when the last time was that I didn't feel like I had to fight for everything, for food, for safety, for respect. And now here I don't feel like I'm at war with the world anymore." He looked at her because of me. She shrugged partly, but also because of you letting me be what I am. Big, loud, scarred. "You're not loud," he said. She laughed once. "You should have seen me when I was 20. He watched her silhouette in the moonlight. "I think I would have liked you then." She looked at him, eyes soft. "You like me now?" "I don't know what I'd do without you." The silence stretched. Then she whispered, "I want to stay. Not just with them with you." Nathaniel reached for her hand. Then stay. They sat like that, hands clasped, eyes on the valley, until the fire below crackled and a twig snapped behind them. They spun at once, rifles raised, but it wasn't a rider this time. It was a woman, alone. She stepped into the clearing, hands raised. She was thin, her dress torn at the hem, mud stray across her skirt. Her hair hung in limp waves and her cheeks were hollow. "I need help," she said, voice cracking. Constance lowered her rifle slowly. "Where'd you come from, North?" the woman rasped. "They raided our wagon." "My husband, he didn't make it." Nathaniel stepped forward, cautious. "You heard?" "No," she said, shaking her head. "But there were others. They took the rest. Women, children." Constance's voice dropped. Took them where the woman looked up, and for a moment her eyes held a strange light. To the man in grey, she whispered. Nathaniel's blood went cold. "You saw him?" She nodded. "He watches, he waits. He picks those who won't be missed." Constance stood slowly. "You said he raided your wagon when 2 nights ago near the fork at Devil's Spine." Nathaniel exchanged a look with Constance. "That's behind us," which meant he'd circled around. He was hunting. The woman swayed slightly, then collapsed. Nathaniel caught her before she hit the ground. She was burning up. They carried her down to the camp and laid her beside the fire. Constance brought water. Evelyn freshened the cloth. The children woke briefly, blinking sleepily at the stranger, before nestling close again. The woman stirred once. "He's not like the others," she muttered. "He wears no mask. He wears his face like a badge." "What's his name?" Nathaniel asked softly. She coughed. "He said it once before he shot my husband." Then she passed out. Constance looked at Nathaniel. "We've got to get them to Fox Hollow before he finds us." He nodded, and then she didn't answer, but the fire in her eyes said everything. Then they go hunting. By dawn, the woman's fever had broken, but her body was too weak to rise. She lay on a bed of pine needles beside the fire eyes, closed breath shallow but steady. Evelyn remained at her side, wiping her brow, whispering prayers and reassurances, the kind spoken by mothers who have lost too much to believe silence is safety. Constance stood at the edge of Camp Arms, folded, staring out toward the east, where the trail bent toward Fox Hollow. Nathaniel joined her, a cup of tin-warmed coffee in his hand, steam curling between them. "She won't make it on foot," Constance said, her voice gravel thick from the cold. "I'll build a sled for her," Nathaniel said. "She can ride behind the cart." Constance gave a tight nod, but her eyes were far off, scanning the ridges. She wasn't lying about the man in grey. "I felt it." "He's tracking us," Nathaniel said, staying just out of reach. "Like he wants us to know." He looked at her. "You ever heard of someone like him?" That name she tried to give, she didn't finish it. Constance shook her head. "I've seen men take what they want. Seen wolves wearing uniforms, outlaws with rules. But this one, he's different. Feels more like a ledger than a man. Like he's keeping count of debts he's got no business holding." Nathaniel sipped the bitter coffee. "Then maybe we settle the account before he adds more names." The camp stirred slowly. The children stretched and blinked against the pale light, their faces puffy with sleep. Evelyn braided her daughter's hair with shaking hands. The fevered woman Marcia, they learned, whispered a few broken memories, but drifted again before she could give more. The bruises on her arms spoke louder than her lips. Nathaniel worked through the morning building a sled. He found saplings bent and tied them with rope, lined the base with blankets, and padded the sides with cut pine. By midday, the sled was ready, and Marta was loaded gently onto it. Her breath hitched with each bump, but she didn't cry out, not once. They moved again, slow and cautious. The trail narrowed, winding through a gully thick with brush. The trees pressed close, their skeletal limbs rattling in the wind like bones warning of a coming reckoning. Constance rode ahead, rifle across her lap eyes, scanning the ridges. Nathaniel drove the cart, every jolt through the wheel-worn trail echoing up his arms. Behind them, the mule pulled the sled with steady effort. Evelyn sat with Marta speaking soft encouragements, her other hand clasping her daughter's. The boy Daniel held the family Bible in his lap and didn't speak once. His face had gone still in a way that made Nathaniel's heart ache. They reached the outer skirts of Fox Hollow just before sunset. It was a strange place, neither a village nor a fort, but something in between. A collection of homes and cabins, all built within a circular wall of split logs, each post sharpened to a point at the top. The main gate was steel-plated thick and worn with a bell hung above, and a set of carved words beneath. She who aru is not weak. Who stays is not safe. Constance dismounted and approached the gate. A woman appeared in the tower above, long rifle in hand, and stared down. "You looking for something?" she asked coolly. "An old debt," Constance replied. The woman narrowed her eyes. Then recognition dawned. "I'll be Constant Weller thought you were dead." "Almost," Constance replied, but not quite. The gate creaked open. They passed inside and were met with a stillness that felt like held breath. Women of all ages stood watching, some holding children, others gripping tools or weapons. There were no men here. None. A tall woman with braided silver hair stepped forward. Her eyes were fierce, though her hands were soft. Mary Constance said, still in charge. Mary embraced her. "Not sure I ever was, but yes." Constance gestured to the cart and the sled. "They need help." Mary looked, her face didn't change, but she nodded. "Well, take them in." That night, Marta was laid on a cot in the healer's hut. Evelyn and the children were given a small cabin near the chapel, and Nathaniel and Constance were offered bunks in the communal barrack, though neither slept much. The tension didn't leave them. Not yet. Fox Hollow wasn't built for comfort. It was built for survival. Every cabin had 2 exits. Every woman knew how to shoot. Children were taught early to dig and patch and fight if needed. There was no shame in scars here, only quiet strength. The next morning, Mary pulled Constance aside. "He's been here," she said. Constance didn't ask who. Mary continued. "A week ago alone said he was looking for someone who didn't belong to him. Said he'd pay well if we gave them up." "What you say?" I said. "Fox Hollow doesn't trade in flesh. Never has, never will. Did he threaten you?" Mary nodded. "Said he'd burn the walls down. Said we'd beg for chains before the end." Constance leaned forward. "What's his name?" Mary hesitated. Then he called himself Merritt Kane. Nathaniel flinched when Constance told him. "Kane," he repeated. "Like the one from the Bible. He carries the same hate," she murmured. Nathaniel rubbed his temple. "And he's coming. Soon." Martia woke briefly that afternoon and confirmed it. "Kane takes what's broken," she whispered. "Says he makes it useful. Says women like us are wasted otherwise." Nathaniel's stomach twisted. They spent the next 2 days reinforcing the walls, setting traps in the trees, and posting guards and shifts. Nathaniel trained the younger women to shoot straight. Constance repaired the rifles and counted ammo. The children stayed close to Evelyn, who hadn't said more than a few sentences since they had arrived. On the 3rd night, the bell rang once, then twice, then silence. Constance and Nathaniel reached the tower first. The guard inside was pale, pointing with a trembling hand. Down the ridge, barely visible in the silver starlight, was a line of riders. Not 5, not 10, 15, all cloaked in grey, all cloaked in. In their centre rode a man taller than the rest, broad in the shoulders coat, hanging like a shadow across the saddle. His face was bare calm, almost handsome, but the stillness in his eyes didn't match the softness of his features. Merritt came. He raised one hand. A signal, and then, like it had been rehearsed, a wagon rolled forward. Jane to it. 3 women, 1 child, faces, bloodied hair matted. Nathaniel's blood froze. He felt Constance stiffen beside him. Kane called out, his voice clear, unnaturally loud for the distance. "This doesn't have to go bad. Send out the women you stole, and I'll trade these." He gestured to the captives. "You took from me, I take from others. That's how the world works." Nathaniel's grip tightened on the edge of the tower. Constance's dead face carved in stone. He thinks he can barter in flesh. Cain turned his head slightly. You've got till sunrise. Then he rode back into the shadows, leaving the captives chained to the wagon, barely clothed, trembling. Nathaniel stepped back from the ledge. We can't leave them. I know. And we can't give up Elin or Marta or anyone else. I know that too. So what do we do? Constance looked down at the town, at the women arming themselves, preparing for a siege, then at the darkness beyond. And then she said it. We go out there, just you and me. We end him before the sun rises. Nathaniel blinked. Constance. Cain won't expect it. He's never been hunted, only worshipped or feared. He's too proud to guard himself. You're talking about assassinating a man surrounded by killers. I'm talking about ending a storm before it wipes the map clean. Nathaniel didn't speak. He didn't need to because she was right. And before the moon set, they rode out, just the two of them, into the dark. The air beyond Fox Hollow's timber wall was still and heavy thick with the breathless weight of what hadn't yet happened. No birds sang in the trees. Even the wind seemed to hold itself back. Nathaniel and Constance moved like shadows between the branches, their horses left behind, their rifles strapped close. They had stripped themselves down to essentials. No blankets, no fire starter, no weight that could slow a clean kill. Each step forward was deliberate. Every branch avoided, every leaf disturbed with care. The darkness ahead wasn't just a place. It was a promise. Cain had set up camp at the base of Widow's Ridge, where a flat, rocky clearing opened into a natural amphitheatre, an old place where trees grew twisted and the stones bore the grooves of wagons long gone. It was the kind of ground that remembered violence. Constance had passed through here once before, years ago, with the weight of failure dragging at her heels. Now she returned with something else coiled in her gut resolve. They reached the ridge's edge by moonlight and crouched low in the brush, peering through the limbs. Below them, Cain's camp was orderly, unnaturally so. Tents in neat rows. Campfires spaced evenly, burning low but steady. A single patrol circled the perimeter, 2 men at a time, always moving clockwise. The prisoners, the women and child, remained chained to the wagon in the center beneath a makeshift awning guarded by 2 more men who dozed with rifles across their laps. And at the far end, removed from the firelight, sat Merritt Cain. He rested on a folding chair beside a tall iron crucifix planted into the dirt like a marker. A canvas tent stood behind him untouched, but he hadn't gone inside. He didn't sleep. He sat like a judge waiting for the guilty to find him. His long coat dusted with trail grime, his boots too clean for a man who'd walked far. Constance whispered, "We take the outer patrol first, then the guards at the wagon." Nathaniel scanned the camp. "You take the east side. I'll swing west. Meet at the tent. No second guesses." He looked at her. "If we don't come back." "We're not dying tonight, Nathaniel." He nodded. "Then we make it count." They split into the trees. Constance moved low and quick, a knife in hand, not her rifle. Silence would be her advantage here. The first sentry passed close. A young man, more boy than soldier. He held his rifle like a broom and yawned mid-step. One clean movement, one arm around his throat, and he was on the ground, unconscious. She dragged him into the brush and moved on. Nathaniel wasn't as silent, but he was fast. His first man didn't even see the blow coming. A single elbow to the temple, followed by the dull thud of a body hitting moss. The second noticed, but too late. Nathaniel tackled him low, wrapped his arms tight, and drove his head into a stone. No time for mercy. The world had seen too little of it. They reconvened by the wagon, each now with a second rifle slung over the shoulder. The 2 guards by the prisoners were dozing faces flickering in the firelight. Constance hesitated. Quiet. Nathaniel shook his head quick. They stepped forward as one. 2 muffled shots. 2 bodies dropped. The prisoners gasped, one woman clutching the child who whimpered but didn't cry. "We're here to help." Constance whispered. "Stay low. I believe we fight to make it true," she said. "Even if it's only for one night of peace." That night came slowly. They didn't kiss. Not then, They just stood together side by side, while the land grew quiet again. Weeks later in the little chapel, with the sun spilling through the windows, like firelight on old stone, they were married. There was no preacher, just Mary, who read from a tattered book of Psalms. No rings, just braided cords tied between their wrists the way the women of Fox Hollow had done for generations. Evelyn stood behind Constance, beaming through tears. Nathaniel's hand rested on the shoulder of Daniel, who held the book and didn't fidget once. Martia sang, voice still raspy but strong, the notes echoing through the rafters like wind in pine. It wasn't a grand wedding. It was better. Afterward, they shared a meal beneath the orchard trees. Wild honey smoked meat flatbread seasoned with herbs from the garden. Constance wore a new dress hand-sewn by 3 women who had once feared every man's step. Nathaniel wore his best shirt ironed so stiff he could barely breathe in it. But he smiled all day. Late that night, long after the fires had dimmed and the children were asleep, Constance sat beside him on the porch of their small cabin. Her fingers brushed his warm and calloused. "You never asked me why I took the agency's offer," she said. Nathaniel turned to her quiet. She looked out over the hills where shadows curled like resting beasts. "I saw the ad. Said you wanted someone delicate, soft good with a needle and pie crust." I almost laughed. "Why'd you come anyway?" he asked gently. She smiled faintly. "Because I'd tried everything else, and I wanted to be chosen for once, even if it was by mistake." Nathaniel squeezed her hand. "You weren't a mistake. I know that now." They sat a while longer in silence. Then Constance said, "You still think about what it would have been like if I hadn't stepped off that coach?" He nodded sometimes, and I don't like the picture I see. She rested her head on his shoulder. "I like the one we're in better," she said. And they stayed that way together while the night stretched over Fox Hollow, quiet whole, and at peace. The wind shifted through the trees, not with warning, but with welcome. And from the gate, 2 new women entered, children trailing behind, seeking something better. They were greeted not with suspicion, but with open arms.